So welcome to this new video. I know it has been a while, but I am back. Fortunately not with comparative content or live commentary, just gonna be me yapping about the BTD Battles arena system, Battles 2 arena system, and Elo systems in general. Yeah, I don't really like most of the systems used in video games in general. I know it's really tough to make a proper system, but most of the systems are flawed. I've had these opinions for a while, just never made a video about it. Couple of days ago, Age of Empires 2 content creator / competitive player Hera had some good points about the Elo system in Age of Empires 2, which is a pretty standard Elo system. And he said that for new players it's really bad, because as a new player you are a beginner, you are one of the worst players in the game when you start. But the starting Elo is the average Elo. So you're gonna play against people who are way more experienced than you, way better. So for the first like 20 games, you're just gonna be losing, and most people don't want to do that. So they just quit the game after losing like 5 times in a row. And that just makes the Elo system super flawed for beginners. But more about Elo systems later. We're starting with BTD Battles. By the way, I found some old gameplay from over a year ago. That's what's playing in the background. It's not related to this video. But yeah, let's start BTD Battles because that's the game I'm the most familiar with, and most of you guys probably as well, since a lot of you guys have played the game before. So the first thing I don't like about it is that you are not forced to make progression. You're not pushed into the next arena once you have a certain amount of games won or medallions or win rate, which is really bad for new players, because there are a lot of players in Yellow Stadium, and some of them are smurfs with a couple 100,000 or millions of medallions who just play there to boost their ego or win rate. And like, oh yeah, I'm just a casual player, I don't want to care about increasing my medallions, so I'm just playing the lowest arena. That's a really bad thing for new players, because they're just getting bullied by these players. Like, you should, once you get a certain skill level, you should just move on to the next one. Like, now we have people with tier 4 powers and way more experience bullying new players into quitting. It's really bad. Like, I don't like Battles 2 the old Battles 2 system was way better, and I don't like Battles 2, but I had to give them that. The old system was pretty good. But yeah, another issue with the current system is the fact that assault modes exist. And assault mode is completely disconnected from the regular arenas. And so most people who start playing assault mode will never switch to arenas. Arenas is just something scary. Because you have to spend your medallions to get in. It's basically gambling your money away, because it's a 50-50 whether you're gonna win or not. And a lot of players in assault mode probably don't even know that arenas exist. Like, there might be a lot of even long-time players who are completely unaware of battle arenas, because it's in a completely different menu. It's outdated and completely disconnected from what should be considered the main part of the game. Another issue of leaving progression up to the player, having them make their own decisions on progression, is a lot of players want to progress, kinda, but are scared to progress. Because, like, you have this, the entry cost is literally the same as what you would win. It's a 50-50. And a lot of people wouldn't go to the casino and play play roulette. Like, well, roulette isn't technically 50-50 if you do black or red. It's not a 50-50 there, but still, most people wouldn't go to the casino and do big bets there. That's not what it's in most people's nature. Okay, there are people who love doing that, but the majority of people are not like that whatsoever. And I know this is a video game and not real money, but it's still, to a certain degree, translates to the in-game currency, and people not wanting to just waste it. Another reason why people don't want to progress is they like winning, and even if the no events against worse players, they still prefer winning 80 or 90% against noobs than to go 50-50 in a slightly higher arena, even though playing that high arena against better players would make them a better player in the long run. But yeah, it's a 1v1 game, so unfortunately it's just not possible to go 90% for most people. Like, okay, competitive level, people go 90% arena all the time, but that's just because there aren't enough good players for them to play, so they play worse players than them, so naturally they go a high percentage. But if one player goes 90%, that means some other players will go below 50, because it's a 1v1 game. It always evens out. You cannot have everyone have a positive win rate, and people want to maintain a positive win rate is really hurting the progression, and which is again bad for the new players who face people who should progress but aren't. But yeah, that's the negative things I have to say about the arena system in Battles 1. Now it's gonna be more positive. This is why I talk about why I like the old Battles 2 system. So the good thing about it is that you're forced to progress. And if you're not ready to progress and you still go 50-50, then you're not progressing. You stay in that arena, because as long as you go 50-50, that arena is fit for you. So no progression. That's perfect. And then eventually, once you have some experience and you're no longer a beginner, you're already an intermediate player, that's when you go into the Elo system. Like, going straight into the Elo system of a game is a huge mistake, because you don't want beginners to deal with that type of stuff. It's just way too stressful and way too painful to just lose all of those games. But having that later in your journey to the game and to the progression is way better. Another positive thing about that Elo system is that it's with seasons, and because of that, the Elo is really inflated, which means if you're an average player and you go 50-50, you will still get slightly more Elo, which is good, because someone with 200 games played who has 100 wins, 100 losses is probably better than the average player who enters the half masters for the first time. So they should be above someone entering half masters for the first time. That's a good thing. And I think Elo systems in video games should be like that. You should have some inflation around the starting Elo, so that new players or average skill players, once they play more games, even if they're not getting better, they should still progress way higher up through the Elo, so that the new players will actually face other new players at the starting Elo. Of course, this isn't possible with a permanent Elo system, and it's still having a lot of inflation still has its issues. Like, for the top of the Elo system in Battles 2, and any system with huge inflation has massive issues. Like, for competitive players, the Elo system was absolutely garbage, and they should definitely make some adjustments to it. But for the average player, that system is really well made. But Elo systems in general have a lot of issues for the higher tier players. Like, the majority of the players is average. So around the starting Elo, the average Elo, you have a lot of players. But once you go higher up, the field thins out a lot, which has the consequence of being really difficult to find a game against someone similarly skilled. So if you're like the number one on the leaderboard, maybe you are like 100 or 150 points above the next guy, and that guy is probably not even online at the same time as you. So you can be playing against people 300-400 points lower than you, and at that point it's not just about skill, it's about just grinding through all of those games against people who are significantly worse than you, and you winning all of those games. It's not about being the best, it's about being consistent and putting in the hours, and that's the only way you progress your Elo once you're high up. This is a bit extreme because talk about a number 1 player, but even if you're like a number 10, 20, 30, if you're high up in a system like that, you're not with a random queue as the only way to play the game or to win or lose Elo, you're gonna have that issue where you're just not gonna have the games that you want to have, and it's just grinding Elo just becomes a grind fest rather than an accurate representation of skill. But yeah, that's just Elo systems in general. Quickly want to shine some light on the newer Battles 2 system, where you can where you only progress every week. I think that's really bad because first of all, you're forced to play every week. If you take a 1 week break, you're down in Arena. Amazing. And you can't just grind out the game and make quick progression. You have to play like for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, and then in 1 week go to the next arena and then play again the next week. You can't just grind out the arenas in like a 5-6 hour session. It just slows down the progression. I know a lot of mobile games have this, and Battles 2 is technically mobile/PC game. It's crossplay, but the Ninja Kiwi's goal was to make Battles 2 a competitive esport types game, and now they're really leaning towards it being a mobile game. Like, this is a mobile game system for the casuals, and that's not a good thing if you want to have PC players take the game serious. And if you want the game like that to be an esport, they should have improved the Elo system higher up, because I praised the Elo system for new players or average players, but for the top players it was absolutely abysmal. People getting at end of the season like 5-6k Elo. It also had a double Elo system, and one of the Elos was hidden. One of the 2 Elos was hidden, which is really weird. And queuing was a pain. It's like, I know, fortunately they were working with seasons. There was saving it a little bit, but it was higher up. It was just a mess. They should have definitely made some adjustments. Like, I think higher up there should be some decay, just to bring the top down a little bit more and make the grind less worth it, because we don't want it to become a grind fest, so just make the grind not worth it. What else did I want to say about it? Oh yeah, the fact that there are different seasons. I hate it in the current system where you have to play every week to progress, but in the context of how the old system, where one season takes like 2 months and after that you lose some progression, that's fine, because if you play a lot of games for like a couple of months and then you quit for like a year, you shouldn't be back at the progression where you were before, because you definitely lost some of your skill and knowledge. You shouldn't be all the way back as a beginner, but you being put back a little bit, that makes a lot of sense. And we don't have that in Battles 1, where you skip your medallions and can go straight away back into the arena where you played last. And a lot of this will result in a lot of players lose their medallions. Like I've seen this many times where someone said, "Yeah, I used to play 3-4 years ago," and if they showed me their account, like, "Oh, that's pretty good," and then they start playing the highest arena, and they just start losing 95% of their games for the first 2-3 days because they're just boosting everyone at that point. That's slightly false. The thing I like about the Battles 1 system though is the way they implemented the club arenas. I love how they're actually part of the arenas. I hate how they've done it in Battles 2, where it's a separate thing and kind of an irrelevant thing, to be honest. Like, I'm not saying the club modes by itself are bad, it's just I don't like how it's implemented. But yeah, already talked about how the problems with Elo systems, that it also really applies to Age of Empires 2. I'm linking the video in the description that Hera made. Good video, and it's just true in general about almost all Elo systems that are in video games. But yeah, let's go back to Battles 1 because that's the game I'm playing, and here's some ways I would make the arenas better, and I'm talking about making the arenas better for beginners, not for the long time grinders. Like they are the top 0.01% of players. The arenas are never going to be perfect for them, but having the arenas be good for beginners is a big deal because you don't want players to quit within an hour of opening the game for the first time. So first thing I would do, remove the sword mode and add like an arena before your stadium that costs no medallions to enter, but you still gain medallions. And put restrictions on what players are allowed to join that arena and what players are not allowed to join it. Like a restriction, if you have above 100 medallions, you're not allowed to play it. Or that I would also add restriction on powers and towers. Like only tier 0 powers in that lowest arena, only tier 3 towers, because it should be for beginners and they're not going to have a lot of towers. So if some really experienced players loses all of his medallions and then goes play that low arena because he can't possibly lose medallions, even if he loses, he's still going to destroy the new players. Like, that's not fair. So restrict the use of the higher tier towers, ban Koba obviously, and do the same thing for your stadium, White Waste and that dungeon, but the higher you go, the less restrictions you have. Another issue with battles is that the balancing is made around competitive, which is fine as a competitive player. Like I think any player would go 80-90% in the highest arena would agree that the game is pretty balanced. Heli is a tad too strong right now, but overall the balancing is pretty good. You don't have broken stuff, you don't have super underpowered stuff, almost everything is viable. But lower down, the game is way too difficult, the balancing is way worse, but the balancing being bad is not the problem for casuals. The main problem is that the balancing is made in a way where the game is super difficult for casuals, and to make the game easier, they should have to up the starting eco from 250 to 275. This will just give a huge boost in the early game and should snowball into just having overall more money. If you give this money to competitive players, you just instantly get a passive man and the game becomes way too easy. But having that in like the lowest 2, 3, 4 arenas, just introduction to the newer players. Honestly, it's not just an introduction. Like if you take the bottom 4 arenas, that is like already 80% of players. But for those players, the game is way too difficult right now, and I truly believe that giving that a 25 more starting eco would make the game way easier and thus more enjoyable for them. So yeah, that's the 3 things I would do. Restrictions on what arena you're allowed to play based on medallions or a separate system. Not better score is abysmal. But this is a restriction so that not everyone can play the lowest of low arenas. Restrict uses of higher tier powers and towers in low arena, and up the starting eco to make the game more enjoyable. Well, that's just me yapping for 20 minutes. Think this video is long enough. Just stay here with me. Don't expect a lot of content from me coming in the coming weeks. I'm gonna be abroad. Gonna have a little vacation. But after that, hopefully I'll come back to the game and actually upload some live commentary. See you then.